Before we get into the very intriguing Odell Beckham development for the Miami Dolphins, help us out by sharing today's video. It's pretty straightforward. The more shares we get, the better audience does. The more we grow, the more we keep the literal lights on here at Chat Sports. So help us out with a share today. Odell Beckham has now very much been linked to the Miami Dolphins. In fact, he is on a visit as we sit here filming this. And the team pretty clearly has interest in adding him, depending, as we'll get into, on what the cost ends up looking like. Now, this was the report from the Miami Herald, who I believe broke the news and has now been confirmed by others, saying, quote, at least one high-ranking member of the Dolphins organization would like to add a more accomplished third receiver to complement Hill and Waddle and give Tua Tagovailoa another weapon. But they're being selective in that process. They've reached out to receivers of high pedigree and others who are less accomplished. The question is how much they're willing to pay. Last year, Odell Beckham got a one-year, $15 million deal with the Baltimore Ravens. The Dolphins have zero desire to do that, and nor should they have any interest in doing that. That is a reckless overpay for a player who is simply not the guy he was at his prime. But the Dolphins saw what happened when Tyreek Hill and or Jalen Waddle missed time last year. They were kind of lacking an additional horse in the wide receiver room to help the offense, to help make it the dynamic, explosive unit it is when it's at its best. The reality is for Odell Beckham, he's not going to be a 1,000-yard receiver anymore. I don't even think in this high-powered Dolphins offense, with the presence of Hill and Waddle, would he be even close to a 1,000-yard player. I think the guy you saw in 2023, the guy you saw in 2021, when he, after missing all of 2022, is probably a realistic target for on the higher end of what you would get in Miami. If you can get 400, 500 yards, some TDs, some big moments, some big third down conversions out of Odell Beckham, that's fine. Because you have Jalen Waddle, you have Tyreek Hill, and maybe he shows up for a big game or two in the event one of those guys ends up missing time with injury. So we will come back to this and go more in-depth as well. But do you want to sign Odell Beckham Jr.? It's a classic question we haven't really gotten to use before on Dolphins Today. OBJ for yes, or no BJ for no. It's the pinned comment on today's video. If the ad comes on YouTube, great. Ignore the ad, go vote instead. Look, Beckham is not the same player anymore. The injuries have robbed him of what certainly looked like a Hall of Fame, among the best receiver ever trajectory at the start of his career. The meeting is critical to figure out if this works as a fit. Does this make sense for Miami and for Odell Beckham? The money has to make sense. The role has to make sense for all parties involved. There are times where it makes it sounds like Odell Beckham still wants to be Odell Beckham and get the target and the money he thinks he's owed. He should not get anywhere near $15 million. If he is on board and will remain on board and not cause any issues in terms of potentially being a diva, fighting a net, whatever, if he is okay being a cheap wide receiver 3, knowing he is a tertiary target option behind Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and hell, maybe even Jonnu Smith in some situations, then I'm all for it. Because I do think receiver 3 is an area this team can find a way to be better, to upgrade, to set themselves up for more success. Braxton Berrios can do slot stuff for you. Maybe Eric Ezekama does have a breakout. I'm not out on him, but it's tough to fully bank on him as just an option there. River Craycraft, by the way, did re-sign last night. I don't think that limits the Dolphins' interest in a draft option. More on that in a little bit. Or hypothetically going after Odell Beckham, Braylon Sanders, Anthony Schwartz. It's speed, sure. This team is not done, nor should they be done, I believe, adding wide receiver help. So if Odell Beckham fits that mold, great. Let's do it. Now, if you have Dolphins fans who are friends of yours, tell them about our channel. Help us continue to grow here. Send them the video. The more shares we get today, there's a direct correlation to better results, and then I can feed my family. Let's go to the draft here. And I was very intrigued when both head coach Mike McDaniel and GM Chris Grier are part of the Dolphins contingent that went to the Texas Pro Day on Wednesday. 5 notable prospects. There are some other defensive players, a linebacker, a corner that could potentially get drafted. Other, deeper later round receivers like Jordan Whittington there as well. He could be a fun fit in Miami. The notable prospects, the ones that move the needle. Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, both at receiver. Devondre Sweat, Byron Murphy II, both at defensive tackle. And I'll make note of Jonathan Brooks, the running back, but I think spending a second-round pick on him is a luxury that doesn't make sense for this organization. So prediction time, whether it's round 1, round 2, or even later rounds, it's a Ryan Watts, it's a Jonathan Gray, whatever. Will the Dolphins draft a Texas player? Y for yes, N for no. The 2023 stats for both of these receivers were impressive in an offense that, hey, Steve Sarkisian, maybe he's not a great NFL OC, he wasn't that bad, has had some very successful results down in Texas. Xavier Worthy is the speed receiver. A.D. Mitchell, who is not slow either, offers you a bigger body and a bigger frame. Both players could fit the Dolphins. They're clearly interested in some capacity in upgrading at wide receiver 3, and maybe they're looking long-term at one of those guys being wide receiver 2. Xavier Worthy's speed, the vertical threat that he offers, and despite his quarterback not being great at that, and the short area screen, bubble screen game, reverses, etc. game, that would be a lot of fun in the Mike McDaniel offense. And A.D. Mitchell, who's also pretty damn fast for his size, would be a different element that isn't really present on this roster in terms of just the bigger body on the outside and would still bring the speed this Dolphins team, I'd argue understandably, covets on offense. Here's my issue. As fun as it is, isn't wide receiver a luxury pick? When you have needs on the interior of your offensive line, when you have needs on the interior of your defensive line, more on that in a minute, I would argue it's a fun but luxury-based pick that maybe this team can't afford unless they are so in love with Mitchell or Worthy that they'd be the top player on their board. I think they'll be close to it. I don't know about top, though. Now, we will have plenty of NFL draft coverage, free agency coverage for you guys as well. Hit that sub button so you don't miss out. YouTube.com/Dolphins News. Let's go to the defensive lineman here. Devondre Sweat is a run stopper. Now, his pressures were not that bad, relatively speaking. He offered a little bit of that pocket push. I don't think he has the athletic juice to truly be a 3-down player in the NFL, or at least a consistent 3-down player. Byron Murphy, I think, can be. His tackle for loss number is also very impressive. He's not nearly as big as Devondre Sweat. Sweat's like 360 pounds or something absurd. But Murphy, who's sub 300, right around that range, is a really good athlete. And I think if you're replacing Christian Wilkins in a archetypal 3-tech, 5 technique role, Murphy fits that really well. Now, Sweat, he shouldn't go in round 1. I think that'd be a pretty big reach right there. He could be an option in the second round. And if you want to get that run-stopping nose guard, the guys I like, it's Devondre Sweat round 2, kind of late round 2, McKinley Jackson, later round 3, and it's not a great crop overall. I think that Byron Murphy could be a great fit. Now, the presence of Mike McDaniel makes me think offense was a focal point there for Texas, but your head coach should know what your potential first-round pick should be. I would have zero complaints if he even got there. There's a no guarantee he does. I think Byron Murphy would be a fantastic pick for the Miami Dolphins. You want an impact defensive tackle. You're still looking for that. Yeah, you got bodies right now on your roster. He might not ever be as good as Christian Wilkins. That's okay. Even if he's still an impactful starting caliber defensive lineman, that is a win drafting outside the top 20 in the NFL draft. So I think Byron Murphy would be a really good addition to the Dolphins organization. Who knows if he gets there? There's a lot of different routes they could go as well, and I would have very few complaints about it. But I would keep my eye on Murphy and Miami. I think the fit, the need, the talent level, it's all a good match in round 1 of the NFL draft.